Hey guys, my name is Nick B, and let's jump into the futures overview. So, I've been traveling a little, so I haven't been able to upload the futures videos in the last 2 weeks, but we're back on the roll, back home situated. So, let's start with the economic calendar. Monday, we have Empire State Manufacturing Index at 8:30. Tuesday, we have core retail sales at 8:30. Wednesday's quiet. Thursday, we have unemployment claims at 8:30, and then Fed Chair Powell speaks at 12. Friday's quiet. Okay, fair. Not really expecting much. Maybe retail sales is going to give us definitely some kind of a reaction, but we'll see. Right. Let's clear the drawing set and let's start fresh. Okay. So this is our 2-year daily, and let's start setting up some of the SNR levels, kind of the channels formed, the channels that we're in between. I gotta resort to the pivot points of the previous higher lows right here. I always gotta mark off the all-time highs, just a habit. You have the pivot point here at 43.25, and then let's see. We're above 43.25. I know I've been mentioning levels such as, let me see, I have it in front of me, like 4300, 4310. I know 4400. I'm sure we're going to be able to break this down on the smaller time frame. Let me just see, what's this? 4430 was the last session highs, but also on the daily, it seems like if I can map out a channel here, I think it seems like we have, oops, like that. That's better. Let's remove this. Okay, so if we have bounced off of this, well, really, I'm watching for 4300. 4300 is, I think, going to be that psychological base support. If we dip below 4300, we could probably expect us to make our way down to 4280, 4260. Really, the target for me would be to the downside. 4200, but I know that 4150 is also on some traders' radars. 4150 is coming around here, which were the previous lower lows back in, when was this? March of 2021, a little ways away. Um, there's one thing I realized when I was looking through the levels too, and when I was looking at the 2-year daily, you got the highs to the lows. Usually, those are also my favorite times to plot a Fibonacci retracement. It gives me an idea of possibly what to watch out for. So let's see if we go from the highs to the lows. Okay, so 4310 is our baseline at 61.8. Let's set the color blue. Okay. So on the daily, basically, until we get above 45.30, we're not going to see much action. I mean, 45.30, I think, would be the confirmation for us to continue towards 46.30. That's about 100 points. Fair. That's a fair value trade there. And then anything in between here, it's tough to call right now because we could end up heading higher and we could kind of get to 44.80, maybe 44.50, and then reject back down, maybe even 44.40 and reject back down towards 43.10. And then if we dip below 43.10, we're probably going to end up near this 41.50 area, which is our 50% retracement fib on the 2-year daily. I also believe I did a fib not too long ago on the 1 hour from the highest point to the lowest point, and it gave us some interesting intraday levels as well. But really, since we're on the big picture here with ES, really below 43.10, I mean, if you want to short below 4300, you could short and probably set your take profits. I would watch intraday 4280 to the downside, 4260, 4220, and then 4200. Below 4200, really, I would just look at 4150 outright. To the upside, really, I would love to go long above 44.40, targeting 4500, but it's very questionable between 43.25 and 46.30 because you just don't have that certainty here. Clearly, price isn't sure of what it wants to do because neither CPI nor PPI gave us anything of a valid reaction. Lately, the fundamentals, yeah, we've been reacting somewhat to it, but it hasn't gave us any real direction, actual trend on the bigger time frames. We've just been basically in this channel since the quarter started. Since we broke out of here, we're basically in this range from 43.25 to 46.30. So we'll see. That's on the daily. So I'm looking really possible downside opportunities, and even so, I tread very carefully. Let me just remove this channel for now because I'm gonna start breaking it down to um, yeah, we could break it down to the 4 hour. I was going to say 1 hour, but let's take a look at the 4 hour. I'm also going to take off the fib for now, just because we need an idea of what's going on between the intraday levels. And I'm going to change the color of these to yellow, just so it stands out for me, so that I know these are my pivot levels, so I don't confuse them with SNRs. Okay, so we have that. Uh, yeah, no, you're not gonna be able to fib this because probably the levels that I'm looking for, which is the 38.2, 50, and the 61.8, they're probably gonna end up somewhere in the middle here. I mean, why guess? Let me just show you guys. So yeah, so really 38.2. Okay, so we're above 38.2, which is 43.30, roughly around that pivot level. Below 43.30, again, you could play this many ways on the intraday. Below 43.30, you can take a stab at targeting 42.35 outright. The scenario that we went over on the 2 year daily, where I was saying basically watch out for 42.80, 42.60, 44.40, 42.20, down to 4200 as the main target, and then below 4200 straight to 41.50. On the big time frame, that was really conservative look because you're really just scaling 20 points at a time. You're watching out for 20 points on the time at a time. You're not really, you can target that downside, but it's not going to be as concise. It's not going to be as clear as when you break it down to the smaller time frames. For example, like here, you can now assume instead of waiting for a break of 4300 down to shorts of 4280, you can wait for a possible break of 4330, 4329, and target 4235. However, not recommended because the chances, because I we went through this, the chances of it, finally breaking down and some way, somehow reversing or stopping out a bunch of traders and then continuing lower. I mean, we've been through these swings for a few weeks now, so we should be familiar and know better than to take a chance at, trying to trade some intraday levels without any certainty. I mean, look, again, on the 4 hour, this looks great. You can, it looks like, yeah, you can short 43.29 down to 42.35, but then you blow this up on the daily again. And, again, below 43.25, you have quite a few levels that are in the way, such as 4300. You have 4280. And again, the reason I keep calling out 4280, 4260, these round numbers is ES likes to move in those 20-point increments intraday, as well as look at 4280 as a previous higher low. I mean, excuse me, lower low we made, and then we made the lower lows of 42.33. So if we break below 4300, it's not a given that we will come down to 42.35, which is that fib level target on the 4 hour. And again, also on the daily, you have the 200-day EMA. The EMAs are pretty respective when price is approaching them, and 200 on the daily has a lot of weight to it. So what's that? That's 42.94, basically 4300. So again, it's possible we come down to 4300, we wick it, and then everyone piles into short, and then they bounce it. I, or it does break down. Again, these are just the possible scenarios we have to consider, we have to go over, because at the end of the day, you just don't know what's going to play out. You're just assuming the best probability that's going to play out. At the moment though, also on the daily, it looks like this is a bounce, right? It looks like they bounced us off of 42.35. They got us towards as high as 44.30, and then on Friday we closed at 43.40, which is still impressive since we're above the pivot level of 43.25. Now it's really about, do we break below 43.25, and can we continue down to 42.35 or even that 41.50 target that we had on the expanded on the 2 year daily, or oops, or do we slowly start to recover? Do we slowly start to make our way back towards 4400, getting above 4400 towards 4440, and then above 4440 we can easily target I want to say 4500. 45, yeah, 4500 would be first, then you'd go to 4550. From 4550 you'd look at 4630. Possibly. Possibly. The smarter plays, at least what we've been attempting to do, was play the breakouts and the breakdowns of previous session lows or previous session highs. But again, it's just not sustainable. So, for example, this in it of itself is a setup right here, right? Of 44.32. So if we break above 44.32, we get to 44.40. Technically, you could take a bite on a long, as long as the 1 hour candle can close above 44.40, then you have probably that weight and possible confidence that you can continue towards 4,500. However, the last few weeks, what's been happening is you get that confirmation, the orders pile in, and then they stop hunt. I mean, the move reverses. Fine, fine. It's tough. It's tough to look at it, after the fact that it played out, but during the fact, I mean, sorry, during the fact that it's playing out is tough to look at it, but after the fact, it's a little easier to be like, oh well, we could have shorted it, we could have sold it off. Doesn't really work that way. So, because of that, we have to kind of just be open with everything, be free flowing, don't be married to a direction, don't be married to a position. We have to be able to isolate our emotions and feelings out of this as well. When things go bad, things reverse, it happens, but we just got to stay vigilant and keep hammering on. So I think the real setup, because I'm gonna to the upside at least, because me and Carlos have been eyeing it since last week, is a break of 44.40 on ES. I think you can easily target 4,500 to the upside, and then I wouldn't say a break of 43.30. You could get that jump start judging by the 4 hour fib that we have from the session lows and highs, but judging by that, I wouldn't get into short on a break of 44.30 or 44, I mean, excuse me, 43.30 to 43.25. I wouldn't get in on a break of that. I'd rather wait for a break of 4300, because then on the daily, we'd end up basically almost below the 200-day EMA, and then 4300 we know is a psychological SNR. So if we get below that, most likely we can start targeting the lows of 42.35 with really conservative take profits, such as 42.80 being the first take profits to the downside. We could maybe trim a position there and then hold some runners down towards 42.60, 42.40, and then depending on what price action starts to do around those levels, we'll go from there. If we get to 42.35 and we start breaking below it, maybe we could hold on to it for a little bit longer towards 4200, and again below 4200 I'm really eyeing 4150. But what are the odds of that playing out, right? So we'll see. That's with ES. Let's jump on over. Well, hold on. Actually, let's go back to ES. Let's look at ES on the 1 hour now, because I know some of the levels that I've been calling out and covering, I haven't quite plotted them up here. Again, partially it has to do because of the setup that I've had when I was traveling, so it looked a little bit different than what I have up on my throne. Um, but let's look at it on the hourly really quick. So this is our pivot level. This is the fib. By the way, 44.40. This is that main level that we want to get above here, where we have some history here, 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 as well as we couldn't quite make it last session. But again, above 44.40, I think that gives us a green light to head towards 4,500, which would be this pivot here. If we can get above 4,500, again, I think you have a nice green light to look at 45.50, 45.60 area. And then again, depending on what rejects when and where, for example, if we reject at 4,500, well, we could probably expect to see possibly the lows of 44.40 again, or maybe we pull back down to 44.60 and bounce. Maybe we end up chopping between 44.40 and 45.50. It's possible. We've done it basically right here, up, down. Look at these moves here, up, down, up, down, up, down. You could have caught all of that as well. Let me see how many point increments that was, from 44.94 to 45, 40, that's 40. That's not bad. That's about 45 points up, 45 points down. That's not bad, but still very tedious. And I'm not sure I know many traders with enough set of stones to kind of trade through this and catch it consecutively. That's crazy. But again, let's turn back to the hourly. I think what I want to do for this 1 hour too, just so that this fib doesn't trip me up, I want to get rid of the fib here. I'm going to leave the pivot levels though, just so I have an idea of what's going on. And I'm going to start off by looking at the recent. So I'm going to keep this as a marker of 44.40, but the rest back there, we're going to kind of ignore for a second. So let's start plotting off some points of interest here. And I'm going to go ahead and start with right here. This stands out to me. Basically your 4,500 area, 45.66. You have, I'm going to go ahead and edit this to 44.40, even though it's in that area. I think 44.40 would be a stronger psychological close if we can get above it. Look at that. That was a breakdown, retest, and then we continued lower. So I think that would be perfect, a perfect hump for us to get above, to enter into the territory of 4,500, the channel of 4,500. Probably the first piece of R we're going to be met with is on the intraday is 44.60. Again, that 20-point increment range. If we can manage to close above 44.40 and then eventually get above 44.60, again, I don't see a problem why we shouldn't get to 44.80 and really target 4,500. If we fail to get above 44.60, but we close above the 1 hour above 44.40, most likely we might pull back. And then it's either going to be chop, it's either going to bounce off of 44.40, and then again, it's going to attempt to go higher, or we're going to break back down below 44.40, and it's going to be the same song and dance between the same intraday zone, more or less. So that's in terms of upside, at least. I really would like to eye that 44.40 level. I'm going to go ahead and make it green, just so that I know that's that barrier for me. Now, let's see these levels here. Well, kind of looks like an inverse head and shoulder. I mean, not an inverse, but a head and shoulders. You have your left shoulder, the head, the right shoulder, but the neckline is slanted. But no, we're gonna ignore that for now. Uh, let's see. I just want to see this level right here, this right here. I'm gonna ignore. Well, you know what? No, this is a good level right here. You have almost a touch, a false breakdown, a bounce, bounce, false. Well, hold on. Yes, kind of a false breakdown. Not really. I mean, I guess it retested 44.10 area and then continued to break down. Then it acted as resistance. Once we got above it and came back down, acted as support, bounced off of it, filled the gap, continued higher. So this is our psychological 4,300 level on ES that we were mentioning. So again, this is a good marker, I think, for the downside. Instead of waiting for the pivot level to break, right, at 43, 43.25, 43.30 that I've been mentioning, yes, we could, but then again, it could come down to 4,300, 43.10 and bounce off that level just as easily. Whereas if we break below 4,300, that psychological level, I mean, really, your first point of attention to the downside at least is automatically going to be the session lows at 42.35. Intraday, again, yes, I would like to pay attention to 42.80 area because previously we came down to it, wicked off of it, and bounced. Basically came up to 43.25, came retested 4300 breakout, and then broke out of 43.25, retested, and then continued higher towards 43.70. So we don't want to short here. It comes down. I mean, yeah, you don't want to do that because your risk to reward is going to be out of whack. And then what are you targeting? 20 points, 30 points? I mean, then again, I'm spoiled with ES. I'm really used to those 50, 60, 80 point swings. Those are just the type of trades we try to target. So not worth it. Whereas again, here you can set a stop easily at 44.30, right? Safely. So you're risking 30 points. You're risking 30 points, and you're essentially targeting almost 70 points to the downside, 60 points to the downside. So that's a 2 to 1. That's much healthier than, let's say, shorting early on where your stop, I mean, you can place your stop at 43.70, but that's again, you're risking 40 points to get not a guarantee 30 points to the downside, and then only after you get the breakdown of 4300 can you consider the continuation to the downside to take 60 points. So again, just, if it doesn't make sense, it doesn't make dollars. We need everything to add up. And again, in terms of upside, I know that we kind of gapped up. We have a little bit of a gap to fill, I guess, not even, but if this level fails to hold the 4370 previous higher lows as well, again, this we might end up coming down to 4300, 4330, or might even come down to 4340 and bounce off of it. We might just chop around here, or we end up breaking above 4370 and we slowly make our way to 4400. Again, you might be thinking, well, why can we go long maybe at 4370, targeting 4400? And then let's see, we can, well, I don't recommend it because again, where are you going to set your stop? 43.50. So you're going to be risking 20 points to make 30 points, which is not even a guarantee because price might start to stutter somewhere in the middle of 43.80 just because. And then what? You don't have that follow through between here. We really want follow through. That's also why we've been targeting basically the breakouts and breakdowns of previous session highs. For example, let's say 44.30 breaks out. It's a good idea to possibly go long. But again, now that we have our levels a little more in set, I again want to just reiterate, I would like a close above 44.40 before going long on ES targeting upside. Everything in between, hella risk. It's just super risky with very wonky risk to reward ratio, so it's just not worth it. Again, many ways to skin a cat. You can go for it. It honestly, it looks like we went up, down, up, down, up. If we can't get above 43.70 at least into tomorrow, most likely the move might follow through back down, and then we'll go from there. So again, above 44.40, we can go long, targeting 4,500. The midway take profit would probably be 44.60, just because of this nasty wick right here. Right? I just want to see what the follow through on that is. Okay, so it has some history to it, right? We have this last wick that was holding off here as well for this 44.60 area. We have 4460 acting as a resistance level right here with this basically false breakout when price broke down, retested, and then finally we got a breakout. We retested 4460 and then continued higher. What are these previous highs? 4500. Yeah, so that's perfect. I think that would be the setup there. You go long, 4440. The stop, right? Let's talk about the stop. I guess the stop, just so that they don't mess with you, because lately this has been the latest trend in going long above basically session highs, because apparently technicals and the book doesn't matter. You can just throw the book out the window. The market's going to do what it wants to do. Cool. I would set the stop probably at 44.25. 44.20. Yeah, risk 20 points to make 60. And then you target 44.60 first. If you see price start to stutter, it's slowing down, you could either trim the position there, move your stop loss to break even, so that way at least you secured some profits. And if it does pull back down to the breakout level and you get stopped out, at least you're going home with something rather than nothing. And then if we do manage to get a nice clean break above 44.60 to continue, I mean, we can ride that out to 4,500, I think, easily again. But let's see. I mean, I know there's a lot going on outside of the market. I know there's still not some, but there's a lot of uncertainty. Last week, VIX got to even the $20 level, but again, we weren't able to close above it. We're sitting at 1930, I believe. Um, Again, VIX, the thing with VIX, if we do end up going higher into next week, really that level would be 20 for me. If we get above 20, okay, we can focus a little bit more on the shorting opportunities. But if we continue to reject, if we break down below the $19 level and then we end up heading back down towards basically the areas of 17 and manage to make our way below 17, we should be able to see some relief. Um, Again, we're watching the VIX again, a spike above 20. I don't know. I don't know. But that's all she wrote. I mean, with ES, upside and downside, those are the levels I'm eyeing, and that's what we'll go through. Now, I'm going to switch over to NQ. Okay, same thing. Let's, where is it? Clear the drawing set. And then what are we in the 2-year daily? Perfect. Okay, again, same thing. These are going to be the same levels. I just have to point them out because they're pivots for me. So it's going to be this one right here, which is our 15,265 area, 15,285. I mean, basically, potato, potato. Then we have, it's just because it's a habit for me. It's like, I just have to have it up there. The all-time highs, okay. We have 16K, but really, let me focus on the pivots for now. And then 13,750. Now, the pivot levels, all they do is just representing the floor that we're in. And depending on the floor that we're in, should be the direction we possibly take on. So this is a good example right here. So ES was above 43.25. So as long as we're above 43.25, we could keep taking chances on aiming at 46.30. NQ is a little bit different. This 15,265 area has been very, very funny. In it of itself, the floor really goes from 13,750 to 15,265, and then you go from 15,265 basically to the all-time highs. But within the floor of itself formed another floor, and we have a bit of a downward channel too. I just want to check something out really quick. I want to see if I can make a trend line here, and then I'll do one. Come on. Okay. Let me just clean it up, adjust it a bit. All right. Oops. Come on. Almost like a wedge, would you say? Almost like a wedge. Maybe we end up rejecting 15,265 if we do end up pulling back up to it. I see that we're above 15,160. 15,160 where previous session highs, an important breakout level for us that took us essentially higher towards 15. What was that top? 15,460. But again, we couldn't hold it into Friday. We closed below it. It's only now we're picking up. But again, judging by this kind of looking wedge, it's possible we come up to the areas of 15,350, 15,4 again, reject back down, and then eventually we'll either squeeze above 15,265, where we'll have to retake the highs of 15,462, which would take us to 15,730. 15,730 basically. Above 15,730 you're looking at 15,9, and above 15,9 you're looking at the breakout of, I know we keep saying 16,000. Above 16,000 would be very nice moral support for the bulls, but really the breakout of those highs is 65, 1660. So above 1660 we can consider the possibility of taking aim at 16,450. Again, that is a long ways away for this to play out. Other than that, also let me just remove this edge. So we know that we are in between, at the moment, 15,265 and 13,750. Okay. But again, we know that it's not consistent enough either. We have kind of a channel forming here, a wedge, if you will. You don't have the confidence in price. Yes, this is technically on the big picture still kind of bullish. I don't like the idea that we're below this pivot though. That's the only thing that kind of makes me go, yeah, I mean, we are elevated, but I'd like us to be above, a previous higher low. That would give us a little bit of confidence, but it's okay. I want to map out the floor now that price decided to make between here, 14,600 and 1662, which I've been mentioning as well. So it's a little bit different on NQ than ES, I'd say. And the reason for that is, uh, I'll show you right now. I'll have them side by side. So we see the pivot levels. Let me pull this up on the 2-year daily. Okay, so we see the pivot levels that basically tell us the floor that we're in between. ES is between 43.27 and 46.30. If we get above 46.30, we kind of almost have a certainty. If we can hold 46.30, we kind of almost have that certainty that we're probably going to end up at 4,700 or maybe even test somewhere near the all-time highs. And then if we reject around the all-time highs, fine. Okay, we come back down below 46.30. It's going to be the same song and dance. And at least if, as long as we're below 46.30, it's going to be hard to remain bullish because we know that the bottom line sand in the line support is going to be at 43.27. Now, if we break below 43.27, technically, yes, it opens us up towards more downside, possibly this area here of 4,200 that I've been calling out. But hold on, yeah, below 4,300, yes, down to 4,200. But you have kind of like you have these intraday levels you can watch out for. But the point I'm trying to make is NQ's not like that. NQ kind of made a floor within its pivot level. So if the floor goes from here, and again, when I say floor, I'm judging that based off of the previous higher highs, lower lows, higher lows, and lower highs that price action has made. If we can break out of those previous lower highs, higher lows, yeah, I mean, excuse me, if we can break out of these previous higher lows, we technically are supposed to make higher highs, which we did right here at 1665. However, we fell short. And again, we weren't able to continue. And again, we formed a floor where technically, if we couldn't continue, we should have came down to 15,265, right? And held that pivot level, but we didn't. Price kind of started forming its own floor in between here. So we're really not between 15,265 and 13,750. The realization, at least that I've figured out over the few months that price has been acting out between here, is that we're between 14,600 and 1665, right? So if we really want any true direction, whether it's shorting to the downside and be confident in that, or going long to the upside, you need a breakout of 1665 or a breakdown of 14.6 where you have that certainty that price can and will continue lower. Everything in between, like I say, is baloney. It's baloney because there's no substance to it. I mean, it's like, you can throw things at a wall and see if it sticks, but that might not be the best thing. However, it's still interesting though to see how price is carving out the channels on the intraday levels. Um, I've definitely experienced something new with this market, as with every market each year. So with NQ, it's a little different than ES, right? Because you have clear indication of direction based on the pivots, but here NQ's kind of doing its own thing around the pivot levels that we are at. So even if we do break above, 15,265, it's not a guarantee that price can now continue towards 16K because we're probably going to have to work through these daily higher lows of 14.7. I mean, excuse me, 14, sorry, 15,450, 15,700 to 730, and then you got 15.9, and above 15.9, you have a green light towards 1665, or whatever that session high was. That's what we see on the daily. So let me go ahead and maximize that again. So let's break it down to the 4 hour and see maybe we could come up with something. You definitely can't fib this. It's not going to give you what you're looking for on the 4 hour. But let's point out some levels that stand out to us. So right away, 14.6, we know this is that absolute floor that we're in between. So below 14.6, you kind of have a green light to come down to 14,250 because that's your nearest support right here. And below 14,250, you make your way down to these previous resistance levels at 13, basically 14K, a psychological SNR. Below 14K, easily you're targeting 13,750 because it was that previous pivot level, and possibly, below 13,750, you're looking at 13,500. But that is like, guys, that is 2,000 points away. I mean, I gotta see nukes flying to short, and I don't even think if some crazy stuff goes down, some end of the world stuff goes down, I don't think it's gonna be even relevant to try to make money in the markets. So that's downside. Everything here in between, how do you play this? Because we could very well come up to 15,265 right now into Monday, and we can reject it and we can take an attempt at shorting it. But what are you targeting? You're targeting 1530, and then you'd have a stop above 15,265. I mean, the only realistic stop is, I would say, 15.5 if you want to be safe, and you would have to swing it because to the downside, I mean, off of 15,265, you're really looking at what, 200 points to the downside. Meanwhile, you're risking about 250 to the upside and about 250 to the downside. Not even, it's 200 to the downside. So your RR is off if you want to short it off of rejection here. And again, you don't have that certainty here. How can you have that follow through? And as well as the certainty aside, but you know look at how wide you would have to place the stop. And the reason is because if you were to place the stop here at 14, excuse me, 15,360, for example, there's a 90% chance you'll get stopped out. And the reason I know this is because I've went through this, especially the last few weeks where we're placing stops a good amount above, let's say a resistance level, and price doesn't care. Or even, for example, a few experiences that we had is we got a break, let's say a break of a previous session, excuse me, not a break, but let's say a rejection of a previous session high, right? You technically can short it down to the neckline. So for example, let's say NQ came up to, again, the session highs of 15,460, and then we started to reject. Okay, you can short it, right? And you can target, let's say, back down to at the minimum, 15,265, or let's say the neckline formed at 15,100. You could target 15,100 after shorting it from 15,460. But right, you get that rejection. It's it's almost, I mean, it's almost inevitable if the market makers want to get an entry in. It's almost inevitable they'll stop you out if you try to place that stop towards the nearest, resistance level, if you're shorting to the downside, or to the nearest support, let's say if you're going long. So let's say we go long on a break of 15,265, and let's say we're targeting, the highs of 15,460. That's a good 200 point trade to the upside at the minimum. Where would you place your stop here? At 15,265. I know I've been calling out 15,250. I know I've been mentioning 15,200, 15,160, but those are blah blah levels. Those are intraday SNRs with no real kind of no real substance to them because you don't have that certainty. They don't determine the direction. They're just intraday swings. The direction is determined on the higher time frame. So again, how do you signal something like that with a stop, right? Our stop, let's say if I put it to right here at 1561, there's no guarantee that I would be safe above that as well. It's very possible that we would get a little bit of a push, let's say towards 15360. Nice, that's 100 points. And if we fail to secure that 100 points, let's say maybe we get a little bit greedy, or we're used to having that directional market where if it's a breakout, you tend to expect a continuation wherever that price broke out, but that's not what's been happening, right? We've been having these breakdowns and breakouts, and price has kind of somehow in between just reverses, and it's become kind of like a norm in the market. So we want to avoid that. So again, how do you signal something here? How would you signal, let's say, a break of 15,470, right? We know that we can target 15.5 as a psychological SNR. We know that we can target 15.7, right? Because it was that previous higher low, as we were making lower lows and breaking down into that wedge of a on the daily, right here, this wedge. So we know that we can target 15.7, let's say, on a break above the session highs. But again, now the question becomes, where are you putting your stop? Okay, so let's see, from 15,470, let's say. We're targeting up to 700, so that's 300, about 330. What? Yeah, about 330 points you're targeting. Now, your closest support is about 150, maybe 200 points away. Now, the rule of thumb is when you do get breakout, you set the stop loss towards nearest support, maybe 10 points below or 10 points above that support. Um, but you don't have that guarantee again, because as price will start to make session highs, somewhere along the line it could end up stuttering, maybe at 15,580 or maybe at 15,540 for whatever reason, and then it starts coming down. And in theory, you're thinking to yourself, well, even if it does come down, the trade is still good because we're above, that previous session high. But then what if we start dipping below that session high? Now now you can do one of two things. You can entirely close that trade out because it's a 50-50 that it's going to come down and stop you out to the support. Or the other 50 is you can keep holding on to that trade, betting or using the feeling of hope that you come down to 15,265 and you bounce off of it and then go from there, which again is not a given. It's not a certainty. Those odds drop to 50-50 as soon as you start breaking back down below your entry or whatever that previous session high is. So where would you put that stop? Because what's been happening is even if you place that stop near the nearest support, you'll get stopped out. You'll get stop hunted. So you have to really swing some of these positions. You really have to have a wide stop. And again, I gotta point this out. You have no direction here. You have no substance and you have uncertainty of what is going on. So how do we play this, right? So the best thing I would say is to sit on your hands, right? But if you were to take a stab, you would require definitely in these conditions at least a wider stop than you're used to. So instead of placing the stop at 15,265, if you're really swinging it, I will place the stop at, let's say, 1550 to ensure that they don't mess with me. However, if on the 1 hour, price starts to break and close below 15,265, you have to manually close that trade out because now it becomes a breakdown. And what's funny is because I've seen this happen, this is just a scenario, hypothetical, but it could come down to not even your stop, but let's say 15,160, which were the previous session highs. Not here, but I'm sure we'll be able to find them better on the 1 hour. 15,160, what was it? Like right here. Yeah, look at that. This is your 15,160 level. So it could come down to here and end up bouncing again and breaking back above 15,265. And now you're in a position where you closed out a short entry because you thought it was a breakdown, but then they bounced it. But then if you would have held it, they would have stopped you out, and then they would have bounced it. So it's like we gotta play our cards right. We gotta consider all possibilities and really be tedious with this, which is what we have been doing and which is what we have been trying. Whoa, it got dark again. All right, so let's look at NQ on the 1 hour because the 4 hour, again, is not really going to tell me anything. Technically, we've identified a possibility of a setup on the daily already, a few actually. And let me run through that and then we'll run through the setups on the intraday. So because this is a wedge, right, a possible wedge, we'll either end up squeezing above it and going higher, or for whatever reason, if we do start breaking down, my intraday support at least is going to be the 15,050 level. Below 15,050, I think I would expect to see the floor of 14.6. On the intraday, we're about to break it down. We'll take a better look. In terms of upside, I would really, really like to go long above 15. I would like to go long at 15,470, and I would like to target 15,700. Again, with a wide stop, but you don't have that given. That is a possibility. You can do that, right? There's many ways to trade. The safer bet, the safer long, let's say, is I would say you get a break of 15.5 just because it's that round number theory. It's a psychological SNR. You get a break above 15.5 and then you enter there a little bit closer. targeting 15.7. You could even trim your position at 15.600, and again, you can have a stop at 15 to 40, let's say, and then if price begins to dip below, let's say 15,500, or you get an hourly peak below 15,470, you can already set yourself up to be like, well, it's possible that we're peaking below previous session highs. It's possible that price starts to reverse here again, and we might come down to 15,265. So instead of me holding on to a trade and hoping that we bounce somewhere down the line, I'm just probably would end up closing that trade. The safer bet, as always, is going to be a breakout of 1660 or 1670, whatever those session highs were. You get a breakout of that level, and you can easily target 16450. And I say that because those were the previous session all-time highs before we made the all-time highs of 16767. That's to the upside. Again, there's also a possibility where if we do end up getting to 15.7, above 730, I think you can easily go long and target 15.9. I know I've hit that trade before, specifically right here, and right here before too. It's a good setup there, I think. With momentum. Momentum was the key pusher every the two times that I entered on a break of 15.730 or so, targeting 59. Momentum was the key player to take you to that level. Again, the safe bet is you go long at 1665, you have that direction towards 16,450, and you ride that out. In terms of downside, again, I mentioned I'd like to ultimately break below 14.6 and then comfortably target 14.250. As well as downside, I don't know if we'll really end up even breaking below 14,000, if that's even a possibility. I don't know if we'll get to even 16,000, but I definitely am somewhat, if I had a bias, if I had to have a bias, I would be still leaning towards the part where I think we're going to end up going higher. I think that could be the bottom, but again, we don't know, so we'll have to see that play out first. All right, man, talking a lot. Let me break this down to the 1 hour and let's see. This is interesting. From the session highs to these lows right here, maybe even right here, I think I could fib something and maybe I might not even have to do too much work with my eyes, and maybe the Fibonacci is going to give me some levels to keep an eye out. Okay, so we place it right there. Let me just change the color so I could see it better. Okay. Interesting. Very interesting. So your 38.2 is the 15,148 on the 1 hour. Your 50 is 15,323. And then your 61.8 is the 15,500 level, which is super, super interesting because look at that, 78.6 is your 15,746 level. So, what that kind of reiterates for me is don't do anything here, basically. Don't do nothing. Wait for the breakout of 15.5, target 15.7 conservatively. Keep in mind 15.6 is going to be a rest stop, possibly to trim positions if price starts to stutter. So you could take profits. If it doesn't, great. It blows through 15.6 and we hit 15.7. Win-win. Now, below 15,148 on the hourly, it kind of is telling us that, yeah, man, we're going to come down to 15,000. But okay, let's say we shorted below 15,150. Actually, no, let's not do that. Let's not do that. I think we had a short last week. Let me just make sure. I think we had a short last week at 15,150. Basic, no, yeah, it was 15,125. It was a little late. Yeah, no, actually, let's not do that. I wouldn't short below 15,150. If I wanted to be a little safer, I would say really, you can take your chances on shorting below 1550, targeting 15K first. You target 50 points first, and then below 15K, I think you can easily target 14,950. That would be the downside trade, I think, to the downside. And ultimately, the safer entry where you kind of shouldn't have to experience any uncertainties. You should have at least some kind of um, awareness and direction is below 14.6, where we again should, I think, should have no problem free falling down to 14.250. And we'll see what we get. So that covers kind of the upside, the downside on ESNQ, what I'm watching out for, what kind of the thought process is going forward into this week, and especially on the past trades that we've went through, kind of what's played out and what to expect. Let me see this on the hourly. Yeah, so 15.5. This is great. Wow, this is a great fib. Uh, just because I'm gonna go ahead and remove the fib, and to the naked eye, I just want to see some levels that stand out to me, and if it just makes sense to me. So I'm gonna go ahead and start off with this level right here, which is what, 15.7, right? 15.730. Not really. I would say this area right here, because we have some history here. Couldn't get above it. If I extend this to the left, look at that. It acts as support here, here. I don't know what this is. Here, here, and then here when we broke out, retested, and we were able to hold above it. Wonderful level right here. Okay, so wow, it actually has some substance. So intraday is building up a case to tell me to go long at 15,470, basically targeting 15,700, and then again, middle line, you take profits at 1560, you trim the position. Now, stop loss. Where would you put the stop loss here? And you would have to swing it wide probably, otherwise they would probably blow you out the water like they've been doing the last 2 months. So let's see. Above 15,470, what's a level that could slow us down? I mean, I do like to look at 5 minutes for entries and exits, but I need to have, I mean, the nearest support you're going to have is 15,265, unless you look at 15,400 and maybe set a stop at 15,350, I would say. And then, yeah, I think I would set that stop at 15,350 if I'm going long at 15.5. And again, you gotta swing it wide. They will find a way to mess you up, man, because I went through this. I went through this the last 2 months. Like it's just it's it's interesting. That's the word I choose for that statement. It's interesting. So let's see, because also at the end of the day, what could end up happening is we come up to 15,265, they reject it back down, it comes down to 1550, we break below 1550, 15,000, and then 14,950, which is going to be like right here, right? 15K. It's all crunched up together. That's why I don't really like NQ on the hourly. So this area for me stands out. What's that? 15, basically your 1550 area. Yeah, you break below 1550, 15K. It's going to be that first take profit. You trim your positions there. Again, and if you're going short side, I would probably, so you're going to have your nearest resistance and a good level that that's a good resistance is probably going to be that 15,160 mark, but I wouldn't set my stop there. I would probably set it at 15.2 or 15,250 to avoid a possible stop out, or maybe even above 15,265. But see, this is where you kind of got to make it make sense, right? We're talking about setting a stop that's about 250 points away. Meanwhile, our take profit is conservative 50 points, and then below 15,000 is another 50 points. So we're targeting 100 points, but we're risking 200 points. Like how do you pick that? Or for example, again, let's go back into the scenario of shorting on a rejection of 15,265. How do you confirm that you will have that certainty that it's gonna come down to 15,000 or 1515, it's gonna break down? You don't. You would have to be sitting there watching price, stressing, and then riling up your emotions and then making a decision. So this is a messy area actually. So I want to take back what I said about shorting below 1550, but again, I can't. There's too many ways to do this, and all of them are valid. I'm no one to judge. I'm not exactly, Mr. Perfect over here, but there's many ways to skin a cat, and sure, you can short at 15,265, you can short below 15,160, you can short below 1550. You can even short below 15K if you really want those 50 points down to 15,950 or even 14,950 or 14,930. But just keep in the back of your mind that anything between here is an uncertainty. Specifically, anything between 14,600 and 1665 until we get a move in either or break, you're not going to have that certainty. It's just I don't see it there. We can work our ways through the intraday levels. Again, we could hammer away at it, and we will take attempts because what's the point of waiting for the perfect entry? There's no such thing as a perfect entry, but we just weigh in what are the best probabilities for us on going long or short, and then we can take it from there. Other than that, I mean, that's all she wrote. I know this has been a pretty hefty one. This is gonna start back up. It's only because it was. I want to say I don't know. I'm weird like that. It was different for me working on a different setup than what I'm used to back at the throne. So it kind of threw me off, and I felt a little not uncomfortable, but not fully like I didn't fully trust the levels that I was seeing on the different setups. I was seeing the levels, but I didn't trust it. I don't know, call it weird, call it whatever you want, but it's good to be home. It's good to have this video running, and I'm definitely looking forward to this week. It should be a solid week, and we'll go from there. Other than that, if you have any questions, guys, also please feel free to reach out to me on IG, Twitter, or on Threads, or even on Discord. For you guys in the Discord chat, I'm always open to questions. Always. Much love. Thanks for joining. I hope this has been a fun session, and I'll catch you on the next one. Have a solid trading week ahead. Cheers.